Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman is a monumental work that takes readers on a journey through the complexities of human thought, illuminating how we make decisions and the underlying mental processes involved. Kahneman, a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, divides the book into several parts, each exploring different facets of cognition, decision-making, and the biases that affect how we perceive the world. At the core of the book is Kahneman's theory of two systems of thinking, which represent two distinct approaches our brain uses to process information and make decisions. Let's start with System 1, which Kahneman refers to as fast thinking. System 1 operates automatically and quickly, with little or no effort and no sense of voluntary control. This system is what enables us to recognize familiar faces instantly in a crowd, drive a car along a familiar route without much conscious thought, or solve simple math problems like 2 plus 2. System 1 is intuitive, relies on heuristics, mental shortcuts, and is influenced heavily by emotions, experiences, and instincts. An example of System 1 at work is when you're walking down a dark street and hear a sudden noise behind you. Almost immediately, your heart rate increases. You might tense up or start walking faster. Your body reacts before your conscious mind even has time to process what the sound might be. This quick response is a survival mechanism, honed over millions of years of evolution. It's effective for situations requiring rapid decision-making, like avoiding danger. However, System 1 is not always reliable because it can lead to cognitive biases, systematic patterns of deviation from norm or rationality and judgment. One of the most famous examples of System 1 misfiring is the bat and ball problem Kahneman mentions. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Your intuitive System 1 might quickly tell you that the ball costs 10 cents. But this answer is incorrect. The correct answer is 5 cents. To arrive at this, you need to engage System 2. System 2, also known as slow thinking, allocates attention to the effortful mental activities that demand reasoning and calculation. System 2 kicks in when you need to do something that requires deep thinking or problem solving, like when you're trying to figure out why the ball costs 5 cents, or when you're navigating a new environment. System 2 is more reliable and logical, but it is also lazy and requires a significant amount of mental effort. As a result, unless we're forced to use it, we often rely on the quicker but less accurate System 1. Kahneman's exploration of these two systems reveals that while System 1 is essential for efficiency, it is prone to errors and should not always be trusted. System 2, while slower, is better suited to handle complex tasks, yet we often avoid using it because it requires more cognitive resources. A key challenge, then, is knowing when to trust our intuition, and when to slow down and apply more deliberate reasoning. As Kahneman moves through the book, he introduces several key cognitive biases, the ways in which our thinking goes wrong. One of the most well-known is the availability heuristic, which refers to the mental shortcut we take when estimating the likelihood of an event, based on how easily examples come to mind. For example, after seeing news reports of airplane crashes, people often develop an irrational fear of flying, despite the statistical evidence that air travel is much safer than driving a car. The vividness and emotional impact of the news stories make plane crashes feel more probable than they really are, even though they are rare. The representativeness heuristic is another bias Kahneman explores. This occurs when people judge probabilities based on how much one thing resembles another. A famous example of this heuristic is Linda the bank teller. Kahneman presents readers with a description of Linda, a 31-year-old woman who is outspoken, bright, and deeply concerned with issues of social justice. When asked whether Linda is more likely to be a bank teller or a feminist bank teller, most people intuitively choose the latter, even though it is statistically impossible for a subset, feminist bank teller, to be more likely than the broader category, bank teller. This mistake happens because people rely on representativeness rather than considering the actual probabilities. One of the most intriguing biases in the book is anchoring. Anchoring happens when people rely too heavily on the first piece of information they encounter, called the anchor, when making decisions. For example, when a person is asked to estimate the population of a city after being told another city's population, their guess is usually influenced by the first number they heard. This bias is so strong that even irrelevant numbers can sway our judgments, as shown in studies where random numbers generated by a wheel of fortune influenced participants' estimates of completely unrelated facts, like the number of African countries in the UN. This phenomenon shows just how susceptible our minds are to initial pieces of information, even when they have no bearing on the task at hand. Another concept central to Kahneman's work is overconfidence. Most of us believe we are more knowledgeable or capable than we really are, often leading to errors in judgment. In fields like finance, this overconfidence can have devastating consequences. Investors, for instance, might believe they can beat the market or accurately predict stock movements, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Kahneman explains that overconfidence is particularly dangerous because it stems from the coherent stories we construct from limited information. These stories often give us the illusion that we understand complex situations better than we really do. One of the most significant contributions of Kahneman's research is the development of prospect theory, which he and Amos Tversky introduced to explain how people make decisions under conditions of risk. Traditional economic models assume that people act rationally, seeking to maximize their utility. However, prospect theory shows that humans are far from rational when it comes to evaluating gains and losses. Kahneman argues that people are more sensitive to losses than to gains, a concept known as loss aversion. This means that the pain of losing $100 is psychologically more impactful than the pleasure of gaining $100. Loss aversion has profound implications in many areas of life. For instance, in investing, individuals often hold on to losing stocks for too long, hoping they will rebound, rather than cutting their losses and moving on. This behavior leads to even greater financial loss, all because people are more focused on avoiding loss than maximizing gain. Kahneman also explains how loss aversion leads to risk-averse behavior when people are presented with potential gains, but risk-seeking behavior when they are confronted with potential losses. For example, when given a choice between a guaranteed $500 gain or a 50% chance to win $1,000, most people opt for the sure gain. However, when faced with a certain loss of $500 versus a 50% chance of losing $1,000, people are more likely to take the gamble, even though the risk of losing $1,000 is high. The framing effect is another critical concept in the book, and it refers to how the way information is presented can drastically alter decisions. Kahneman illustrates this by presenting two versions of the same scenario. Imagine a disease is expected to kill 600 people. In one version, the choice is between a guaranteed program that will save 200 people, or a program that offers a 1/3 chance of saving all 600. Most people choose the sure option of saving 200 lives. However, when the scenario is reframed, and the choice is between a guaranteed 400 deaths, or a 2/3 chance of everyone dying, people tend to take the riskier option. The outcomes are the same, but the framing of the situation alters the decision. Cognitive ease and cognitive strain are also explored in the book, with significant implications for how we process information. When information is presented in a way that is easy to process, clear fonts, simple language, familiar concepts, it induces cognitive ease, making us more likely to believe it. On the other hand, when information is difficult to process, complicated words, confusing presentation, it induces cognitive strain, which makes us more skeptical and vigilant. This concept is crucial for areas such as marketing, politics, and education, where the presentation of information can heavily influence people's beliefs and decisions. Kahneman also introduces the concept of the affect heuristic, which describes how emotions influence decision-making. The affect heuristic explains why people tend to overestimate the risks of activities that evoke strong emotional reactions, such as nuclear power plants or genetically modified foods. If something feels emotionally negative, people are more likely to judge it as risky, regardless of the actual statistical probability of harm. In one of the most thought-provoking sections of the book, Kahneman introduces the idea of the experiencing self versus the remembering self. The experiencing self is the part of us that lives in the moment, experiencing events as they happen. The remembering self, on the other hand, is the part of us that reflects on and recalls past experiences. These two selves often have very different perspectives. For example, a person undergoing a medical procedure might experience significant discomfort in the moment, but if the pain gradually diminishes toward the end of the procedure, they are likely to remember the experience more positively than it actually was. This is known as the peak end rule. We tend to remember experiences based on how they felt at their peak, whether positive or negative, and how they ended. This distinction between the experiencing self and the remembering self has profound implications for how we make decisions about our lives. Often, we make choices based on what our remembering self tells us will make us happy, even though our experiencing self might feel differently in the moment. For example, people might choose to go on a grueling mountain hike because they believe the memory of the accomplishment will be fulfilling, even though the experience itself might be physically exhausting and unpleasant. Kahneman provides readers with practical advice on how to improve decision-making by recognizing the limitations of System 1 and the biases that arise from relying too heavily on it. He encourages readers to engage System 2 more frequently by slowing down, gathering data, and questioning initial intuitions. In situations where decisions have significant consequences, Kahneman suggests using structured decision-making tools, such as premortems, where teams imagine a project has failed and work backward to determine what could have gone wrong. This approach helps identify risks that might otherwise be overlooked. In business, Kahneman's insights are especially valuable. For example, companies can reduce errors in decision-making by using checklists and creating processes that force people to slow down and consider alternatives. Behavioral economics, which incorporates insights from psychology, has become an increasingly influential field in public policy and business as a result of Kahneman's work. Governments and organizations can design systems that guide people toward better decisions by understanding and addressing cognitive biases. For example, by automatically enrolling employees in retirement savings plans, companies can significantly increase participation rates, leveraging people's tendency toward inertia. In conclusion, Thinking, Fast and Slow is an essential read for anyone interested in understanding the intricacies of human thought and decision-making. Kahneman's exploration of the two systems of thinking, cognitive biases, and decision-making heuristics, provides readers with a comprehensive framework for understanding why we often make irrational choices. The book challenges us to be more mindful of our thinking processes, to slow down when it matters, and to recognize the limitations of our intuition. By applying the insights from this book, we can improve our decision-making in both personal and professional contexts, leading to better outcomes in our lives.